And I also like to refer to myself as one of the OOs, the original organizers of the Bond Project. So thank you all for being with us today. I'm excited about this conversation about being a principal, an African-American principal, which was part of my trajectory as well. And so I want to kick it off by each of you introducing yourselves, but also I want you to share your journey to the principalship. You know, for me, it wasn't a straight path because that wasn't something that I saw myself doing. But things happened and I found myself in that space and place and found it to be something that I actually love to do. And so introduce yourselves and tell us about your journey to the principalship.
Guys, I'll go first. I'm Peter Saunders. I am the principal at Maritime Academy Charter School in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. My trip to start here probably started, honestly, at the Million Man March in 1995. I was a senior in college. I was in that moment, and I said, how can I help? And my major was human resources, but I had taken, my minor was something related to education. So I actually found out about a program to get certified. Actually, Sharif El-Mekki, who was, I think, the opening presenter today. He's the older brother of a friend of mine who I was in college with. He told me about a program. It was the 100 Black Men program in Philadelphia. And I got into teaching that way. I left teaching briefly to work in management and nonprofit. And that kind of set me on the path once I got back into teaching to get into administration. So it was a little circuitous route, but I got there and that's where I am now. And I've been a principal I think it's about my 8th year as a principal.
Hey, Peter, thank you for sharing your journey and introducing yourself to our guests, to our audience. Who's up next?
I'll go next. My name's Otis Kitchen. I'm the principal of Town and Country Elementary School in Tampa, Florida. And I definitely have an interesting journey because I've always been an athlete. I've always been a ball player, a basketball player. But at the same time, my mother was an educator and she was an educator for 40 years. And I definitely saw the impact that she made on students by going that extra mile. I would see students coming to my house after hours. My mom would work with these students. I just saw the impact that she always made. During the summers, I played basketball in high school and in college, but during the summers, I would come home and work basketball camps and always be around students and children. And as a result, as I moved on, I started to begin teaching as a result of just always being around students and the influence of my mother. But my mom always told me student achievement and academic success is the reason why students go to school. Don't you ever forget that. You hold true to that. They're gonna try to put you in situations to where you're disciplinarian. Don't fall for that narrative. Always stay true to academic student success. And as a result of her constantly just being impactful in my life, I was able to become a teacher, then an assistant principal, and God has currently blessed me with being a principal.
You, Otis. Joe, what about your pathway?
Yeah. My name is Joe Truss. I'm in my 6th year, finishing my 6th year as a principal of a middle school in San Francisco called Visitation Valley Middle. You know, my path has been pretty linear. You know, I've kind of only really worked in education for the last 16, 17 years or so. You know, tutoring, summer camps, before that, all, you know, like for me, it's just like, it's always been working with young people and doing this kind of work. That being said, for a long time, I was pre-med. So if you would have asked me before my sophomore year in undergrad, you know, I mean, I would have been a 100% surgeon, period, you know? did all the things getting there too, you know, lost all the money not getting it, you know. But like up until that point, every piece, right, all the classes, all the programs, everything. And I hit this point in my sophomore year where I ended up doing a program outside of undergrad that was in the community. I went to Berkeley, but I was in the community in Oakland there and doing the summer freedom school program, all Black, Afrocentric, Black curriculum, Black people, Black children, and led by Black folks in the community, right? So we were learning about the Panthers, right? And their approach to education, right? And movement building. And when I saw that, you know, that was it. That was it. You know, I was like, how can I do this all the time? You know, and then that led me to trying to figure out how can I be a teacher as fast as possible, you know, having to be a Spanish major. So I wanted to be a math teacher, but they were like, you don't have enough units to be a math teacher. You can be a Spanish. And I was like, I'll do it. Let's do it. So that got me in the classroom. And then like even early teaching, I knew I want to be a leader some way already. So like, I didn't really spend too long in the classroom really, like, cause for me, it was like, what's in the way? You know, it's like, cool, I could do some good stuff in my classroom. That's beautiful. I love that. But next door, something else was happening. Down the hall, something else was happening. So then it was about the conversations. Like if the conversations I was having with my leaders at the time, they were not clearing the hurdles for me. They were not opening up the doors. They were getting in the way, and they weren't talking the right talk for me. So I was like, I guess I got to do that. You know, like I guess I got to move there. And for me, that's always been my trajectory. It was like if I don't get the support or the inspiration from the folks who are supposed to be leading or supporting me, then maybe I got to do that job. You know, to figure out how can we touch more lives and make it bigger, right? Because our children are everywhere, you know, they're not just in that one, you know, 217 classroom, you know what I mean? They spend all day, 12 years, 13 years.
Yeah, thank you all for sharing. I connected with each of your stories. I'm a product of I'm a second generation principal and school central service administrator. Many of those messages and those aha moments, that moment when it's like, yeah, this is the path I need to take. Mine was working at a halfway home for students in the juvenile justice system, and realizing that those stats that we hear, they are kind of true, because many of my kids had dropped out or weren't reading, you know, at an age appropriate level. And I thought that maybe I could better serve African-American male students by being in the classroom. And then the rest is kind of history. So with that though, one of the key principles of Bond is that if we improve educational or schools for African-American males, then more of them may see themselves as teachers, as leaders, as district administrators. So tell me a little bit about the climate that you try to create in your schools that is supportive and values Black boys.
I can go first. So my school is very racially diverse, which in the city like Philadelphia is fairly uncommon. So some of the stuff I do is for everybody, and some of it's specifically pointed at African-American males. The big thing is making sure that we don't I mean teachers, don't have preconceived notions about students. I make sure I have high expectations of everybody, and I convey that to the teachers to make sure we're having high expectations. And then I've on my own reached out to some of my African-American male students, offering times, you know, to have lunch with me, just to sort of serve in a mentor role and to maybe kind of humanize myself, if you will, because I'm the principal, and I may not always be in the classroom, but when I am in there, I like to engage them. And I know from my own experience, in my school experience, I was often the only Black student in a class, or one of very few. And it was always important to me when I did see Black males in my school. And there weren't a lot of them. And I can honestly, quite honestly, remember times when there was a substitute. There was a Black male, and I was happy to see him. So I try to be present as much as I can. And overall, I want to make sure people are not presuming the worst and setting a low bar for any student, and particularly Black male students.
Okay, thank you for that.
I'll go
Otis, I see
next.
you yep, I was going to call on you, Otis.
Yeah,
Come
I'll
on.
go next. It all starts with my mission and vision. That's first and foremost, where my vision of my school is all students can excel. And then the mission is to provide students the resources to create their own vision of success. So with that, I make sure that my actions all day, every day are aligned to that mission and vision. So people see me, I see me, some days.
Hey, Otis, you're breaking up on us.
Foremost.
Oh, there you go. You were breaking up on us for a little bit.
Okay, am I okay now?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, yeah, so my actions start first. And then from that, it trickles down to, okay, now I'm discussing our students, specifically the Black male students, and we're looking at their data. And we're adding context to why their data looks differently than Hispanic and white students' data. And that's when we need to start talking about that from a historical standpoint. And then I don't go too far back. We can talk about redlining specifically and how that created generational poverty as an end result. Because if we don't add context to the data, then people start to think that our Black students are intellectually inferior to white students, and we cannot have that. So it starts with my actions first, and then it next starts with putting context to the data in order for us to all understand, so we can have those high expectations so our students can be successful.
Thanks for that.
All right, I'll pop in. So I think just to co-sign what y'all said already, what I'll add is, I mean, in order to value Black voice, we have to silence white voice, you know, and that may sound extreme, but, you know, we're drowning in it, right? Our systems, our culture, right? Our ways of being, right? Even as folks of color, right? So to a certain extent, we have to be able to identify these white supremacist values or these assimilationist values that are baked into everything that we do, right? Whether that's our discipline system, right? Whether that is like they're literally all these pitfalls for us to fall into that prevents us from ever getting to the place of value in Blackness, right? The curriculum we use, all of these pieces, right? The content that we're given, whether we're giving Black studies or ethnic studies or not. So we have to identify that. So for me, one is addressing the mindsets, and what I realized is when we were playing it safe and talking about diversity, right? Talking about cultural competence, they weren't hearing it, right? They weren't listening, and they could still operate in sinister ways against Black children when we were talking that talk. But once this conversation started shifting to white supremacy and racism again and anti-racism, now we can start having a different conversation that now we can say, well, what's going on with the Black voice? We weren't talking about anti-Blackness for a long time. We're talking about lots of things. We were talking about anti-Blackness, maybe not by that name, right? But it wasn't a general conversation. I do think our presence period is one way to create that climate, but I also think like something as simple as what norms we use every time we get together. It's powerful, right? Because we can have some very soft ass norms that sanction white supremacy, right? Even in the hidden form, right? Agree to disagree. Let's just say, right, like for that to be a norm that we always have used, folks can disagree every single time and play on this side of the oppressor, right? We're just disagreeing, right? We just agree to disagree, right? So this idea of engaging in healthy conflict that pushes us towards change or pushes us towards anti-racism, that's very different than agree to disagree. You know what I mean? So part of it is like the conditions, right, are very key, right, of how we set up space, how we hold meetings. And then I think also like what type of routines we build into our meetings too, whether we're playing music, whether we start and connect with each other, whether we slow down, right, the pace and urgency in which we move through meetings, or even the content in the classroom, like all that kind of stuff. There are ways to make it so that Black voice is not valued, right, because it's keeping it as business as usual, right, the status quo. So literally we have to do the opposite of what we were trained to do for the most part, unless you went to one of those special schools like I heard El Mekki talking about. I went to a freedom school in elementary school. That's not an elementary school I went to. You know what I mean? I was trained in white supremacy, you know, so I have to really try to fight those trainings, right? Even we've been encouraged as leaders to do things that do not value Black voice, right? And you get to keep your job when you don't do that, and when you don't value our Black folks. So, you know, you got to be against the grain.
So Joe, just kind of build on some of the themes that you brought up. So in supporting leaders or other principals to lead this work and be able to call out white supremacy, I want to hear from you. Where are you at on that journey, knowing that everybody kind of starts, you know, at different places, you have different contexts, but how do you create that space where you can get staff? Typically, all this, you know, in my experience, most of my staff were women and whites. And so how do we get to that space where we can really have those conversations that are meaningful and really work to create spaces where Black lives matter?
So speaking for myself, I know that this last summer, after the horrible incident with George Floyd, that sort of kick-started a lot of stuff at my school to kind of say, what can we do? What can we do to improve our school? Because I guess it was sort of the vogue thing to do now, right? So it's okay to talk about. It's okay to have these conversations. So we did the book study this whole year. We've done a year-long relook at our curriculum, making sure that you know that the curriculum's culturally relevant. How we've now, with the influx of Esther's money and stuff, we're talking about redoing our tech series, redoing our curriculum. So looking at it from this new point of view, how can we make it best for our students? So I think that the horrible incident of George Floyd really, in my school, and now I'm not in a district, I'm just a standalone charter school. We're two schools, an elementary school and a high school. So we're kind of insulated, but at my school, that's where the conversation kicked into motion. We had a CEO who's willing to have some difficult conversations, and we just told the teachers, this is what we're doing. I'm not bound by any collective bargaining. We just said, this is what's happening. This is why it's happening, because it's important. It's valuable.
Right.
It's not just for our school, for our students, man. They have to understand that maybe the way we've been teaching social studies is not the best way to teach it.
Yep.
You know, it's not helpful.
Right.
It just, to Mr. Truss's point, you know, it just reinforces this white supremacy. So that's my story about that.
Thanks, Peter.
With me, this is my first year on being a principal, and I love that we have opportunities to have Zoom so we can do some work in the evening times. So what I did was connected with educators at my school and started around the book called White Fragility. Some conversations about upbringings of white people, and as a result, their perspective lens on the world as it relates to Black and brown children. So we were able to have these authentic conversations with educators at my school. Now we can go into the school and we can have more conversations with more adults about this same very topic, because I kind of believe in the snowball effect where we start small and we build traction to the point where we're now having these authentic conversations about race as a result and how it impacts Black students specifically. So with that, I also wanted to kind of reframe what images were around our building. So I didn't want to necessarily have any athletes or entertainers being highlighted. That's just me personally. We're a STEM brand school. I want architects, engineers. I want the visuals to be there so our students can connect and see who they have the potential to be. And at the same time, again, with Zoom access, I'm now having Black architects, Black engineers Zoom in to classes to speak, not necessarily during a teaching, speaking moment, but throughout the entire school year, we're having people Zoom in and our students have direct access to these engineers, scientists, so they can ask questions and really truly know it is possible to achieve, and you have access to that. So just a couple steps that I took to kind of set students up, specifically Black students, for success.
No, it's great ideas. The idea of examining whose stories we tell in the curriculum, creating a critical mass, and making sure that we're bringing those the voices into our spaces so that kids are exposed to scientists and other folks in STEM fields. So thank you for that. Joe, what about you?
So I think as far as if we're talking about dealing with white folks and a predominant teaching force of white women, we got to recognize what we bring from our perspective and our experience and what they don't bring, right? Because I think this idea of like the narrative has to flip, right? In the past, it's been they're here to save Black children, so they're bringing everything, right? So white folks, whether they're poor or not poor, come in thinking that they got it. They don't need anything else, right? They're here to teach math and bring the gospel. You know what I mean? And whereas when we flip this thing to say, no, you're actually lacking, right? And there's right. I mean, because like you cannot substitute the experience of being a Black person or a brown person in America, right? With one book or 20 books, right? So this idea of just flipping it for folks to understand that there's a lot of learning that they need to do, and like white folks also want to feel accomplished and like they got there already, which is why every time we roll out a new initiative or a new training, they're like, I already did this. I want to be done with this. Getting folks to understand that you'll never be done, and that's it. Just like we'll never be free in America until something changes, right? This idea of like you'll never get there, so you continue to march on, right? That piece is one, right? And then I love what the summer of 2020 brought us. It really brought us sit down, stop talking, and listen to Black and brown people, right? That wasn't the understanding before, not at least not to the larger population, right? Maybe a couple of white folks that we trust, right? Yes, right. But like this idea of listening to folks, that's part of the conditions to get there. And then, you know, this other piece of right is what I saw was that not really being honest and being direct and explicit wasn't working, right? But once we got explicit, there were different conditions and different conversations we can have. And then ultimately it's just about not being scared, you know? And I'll go a step further, right? I feel like we have to like literally outlaw certain behavior that's getting in the way, right?
Tell me more about those behaviors.
Okay, because normally what's outlawed, right? Pushing back on change, getting angry, showing your emotion, right? Caring about other people and dropping the ball. You know what I mean? Those are the things that are outlawed normally, right? And that's our individualistic, capitalistic, white supremacist, Protestant culture, right? But this idea of once we say it's outlawed to be defensive when somebody challenges you, right? It's outlawed to not answer a question when we're sitting in a room. Like if we're sitting in a room having a deep conversation, you're just gonna say, I'm just not gonna engage in this. I'm just not gonna participate. Like that, we're gonna outlaw that behavior, right? But the issue with that is back to this idea of what white folks are lacking, like what's needed is a framework, right? Like we come with a framework that we've either established, whether we've read books or not read books, because we've had to piece together this framework to survive in this country. Now there's a whole bunch of stuff on paper, critical race theory, right?
Right.
A Freirean philosophy of education, right? Critical pedagogy, right? Like there's frameworks for this stuff now, right? They don't have those frameworks. Right. So what I've realized is when I rolled out critical race theory to folks, I rolled out Paulo Freire to folks, right? Or Bettina Love comes and introduces abolitionist teaching or culture response and teach all that kind of stuff. They don't have those things. So the conditions are like, and this is the hard part, is because like it shouldn't be our job to bring all these white folks up to speed. But who's going to do it? Who's going to do it? They're not doing it on their own. They didn't get it already. They didn't get in teacher ed. So yes, that is a part of the job to say, look, these 10 books, we got to figure out some way you're going to get the content, because then we can have the conversation, because they're lacking systemic racism, all the 10 aspects of systemic racism, red line, we talk environmental justice. They don't have that piece unless they grew up and they saw it. They don't have that, right? So like the conditions are, we got to bring them up to speed just to get to neutral. Then we can talk about what we're going to do with that.
Right. So I'm loving this conversation. I could go for hours, but I want to talk about it a little bit, because this work is heavy. And as a person of color, as a Black man, this work is heavy, because you not only live this experience every day, but you also are trying to get other people to see and to read what's going on so that we can actually be better. So what's your community? How do you center yourself to get up another day and keep pushing through?
Well, with me, it starts with my mission and vision. Like, this is what I value. This is what I do every day. And that drives me every single day. And I make sure that the community knows that and sees me, because we have a school where 95% of the students either walk to school or they're dropped off in their car, which means I have direct access to the families each and every day for arrival and dismissal. So that means, guess what? I'm out there. I'm out there talking to you, communicating with you. You have direct access to me at all times, in the morning, in the afternoon. And then I go periodically on Sundays to my neighborhood, where I'm going into homes, I'm talking, I'm holding people accountable. I'm being a thought partner in the work that we do, because ultimately we need to hear from the families and the students, hear what their voice and their concerns are in order for us to move forward. And I want them to understand that you all are a part of the decision-making process, and that can't happen if, number one, you don't have direct access to me, and number two, my actions do not align with my mission and vision, and you don't visibly see that every day. You need to see that, and I'm sure that that happens.
So Peter or Joe, how do you engage community, whether that be in support to kind of refuel and re-engage? How do you take care of yourself so that you're able to be the change and lead this change?
So in terms of, I mean, again, it's about I'm present, I'm available. I have to, I talk to parents. I said I'm a very diverse school. I have parents that are very, I have parents that don't really care to get to know me or like me because I'm Black. Because I work where I am in Northeast Philadelphia. There's a lot of white working class people that kind of they resent the fact that I'm there sometimes. Now we're a school of choice. We're a charter school, so they make a choice to come to my school because it's safe, and we produce results. But they don't always care they're not always happy that I'm there. So sometimes I have very difficult conversations, but I don't put my head down. I keep my head up. I keep being available. I keep putting forth my expectations of the school and of our students, because I can't back down, because it's important what we're doing. And so I believe in what I'm doing. I believe in the mission of my school. And that helps me to, when I do have to engage with the community, that helps me. That's what I keep front and center.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, a few things. I think one is just knowing that, we rest on the shoulder of giants, sometimes, it's hard, I'll talk about why it's hard in a minute, but when I can fight through it being hard, like I have to remember one, that like people have done much harder work, sometimes when I'm having a hard day, I'm like, all I do is walk, what I mean? Like my mom came to visit me one time, and she was like, man, all you do is walk around with a notebook. What do you do here? You know what I mean? And, ask my teachers, like, you don't do shit. You just sit in your office all day. And, the truth about that is that, like, the work we're doing, it may be intellectually and psychologically hard, but it's nothing what laboring folks go through, or folks who survived through our history have went through, right? So for me, when I'm having a hard time, that gives me the perspective, right? I mean, come on now.
Right.
Our people have been through much harder things, right? And survived. That being said, to make it through this, getting support, having mentorship, I always say I got like 10 mentors, like I hit everybody up when I'm in trouble,
Right.
because like I got to make it. You know what I mean? Like, and I don't want to waste time. I don't want to waste energy. Like, I'm gonna talk to everybody and get a bunch of perspectives and figure out the best way to get there. The balance, that's easier said than done, but when it's good, I'm balancing. Right. And I will say the other piece is, you also, a Black sister, a friend of mine, always says, know your escapes, right? You gotta know your escape route. And I think the system is ran by martyrs as well, right? So this piece of understanding, maybe when you got to the place where you tried all the things you could try, and it's toxic, and it's time to go, because there are children everywhere. And also sometimes we have to send a message to the system to say, no, we're not just going to be martyrs. Right. We're not just going to do your bidding if you're not going to really let us get busy, right? If you're not going to let me fly, I'm out, you know? And because there's some place that is going to let you fly, and that's the truth, right? And there's children there too. Because I do think, like, how we maintain also is knowing our passion and what our goals really are, so we can manifest that, right? Because there's so much we could do under the right conditions, right? Under the right politics or what have you. So knowing when it's time to go and get busy somewhere else is powerful too. That's okay. You know what I mean? Because this system will eat you up and move on from you in a hot second, right? But there may be a place that will let you to say, no, bring your vision. I want to see the Cadillac plan of your vision. Like, don't play small. I've been searching for those places all the time. When people say, like, yeah, no, Joe, we want you to kind of just do this much. I was like, yeah, that's cool. I'm done with y'all. Like, I want to go to a place to be like, what do you want to do, Joe? Let's start there.
Right. Yeah, go ahead, Otis.
Also, one of the most important things that I feel we must do is always protect our minds and be cognizant of our greatness historically. And I want to kind of read a quote from Carter G. Woodson back in 1933. He said, when you control a man's thinking, you do not have to worry about his actions. You do not have to tell him not to stand here or go yonder. He will find his proper place and he will stay in it. You do not need to send him to the back door. He will go there without being told. In fact, if there is no back door, he will cut one for his special benefit. His education makes it necessary. That quote right there is extremely powerful, because if we're not mindful of our thoughts, because the world is already telling us that we are inferior. So if we're not protecting our mind with spaces like this right here, to where we're iron sharpens iron and building each other up, then we would subject ourselves to the fact that we would truly believe that we're intellectually inferior, and that cannot happen.
Right. And you just took us to church, Otis. I'm doing the happy dance, do a happy church dance on the inside. Thanks for sharing that and dropping that. But yes, we got to protect our minds as well, because folks will have you thinking you're crazy.
Have you thinking you're crazy and have you thinking that you're not smart.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So
And that you don't need to be at the table.
say that again. Say that again. So I see in the chat, Joe, there was James wanted to know, here's some examples of some of those norms that we need to flip on their sides that typically reinforce white supremacy culture.
Yeah, I'll share one. So I've been using this norm around be curious and comfortable in discomfort. I use that a lot because I think it challenges the notion of what we normally do when we're uncomfortable and what white folks have trained us to do, and especially what white folks do when they're uncomfortable. And that's the reason I love that one, is because to change education, it's going to require some discomfort, right? We know that growth comes with change, but the problem is we've been trained and rewarded, right, for being uncomfortable when challenged, right? When we, even just when we feel emotion, right? So this idea telling folks, now we can't control what they're going to do, but when we can say, but when you feel uncomfortable, I want you to find out what question is underneath that, as opposed to shutting down. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
I already know this. I don't know what they talk about. I'm so tired of hearing about this bullshit. Whatever that is,
right.
This thing, right? Ask a question, right? Be curious, right? Have some inquiry. Go read a book. Go read 500 books, right? But this idea of like, what do you do with that energy and that emotion, both to get comfortable in it, and that's definitely for white folks too, because we understand we have to find comfort in. We have had to be okay with the discomfort. We already built that skill. That's muscle memory, right? But Absolutely. For white folks, they don't know what to do with that emotion, whether that is George Floyd being killed for 10 minutes, right? Or someone telling them that there's a different way of teaching and learning. Do you know what I mean? Right. So that norm, right? I could write a book on that, right? We could all tell stories on how that looks like in the staff meeting or in the classroom. Like, how do students react to discomfort? That whole piece, right?
Right. And then how do we help them in those spaces?
If I could add to Joe's point, you think about the response to the 1619 project, and so I would think, I can't speak for I've known you guys a short period of time, but I think a lot of that stuff in the 1619 project, it's common sense to us, right? Right. Let's look at what the real history, and what does that beget? What is it? What have we become out of all this, right? So it's not. It would seem to just be. It would be common sense to say, this is part of our history. Let's put this into our history books. Mm-hmm. Let's make this a part of what we teach everyone, students. But the response is just to say, you got this. I don't know the name of the thing, the Patriot thing that they did.
1776 project or something.
Correct, 17, right. So the response is that, and it's just, I'm not, to Joe's one, I'm not going to tune it out. I'm not going to listen to it. I don't care to hear about it. Why? What are you afraid of?
Right.
Why are you scared to hear something that maybe didn't jive with what you learned in fifth grade in 1962? You know what I mean?
And why aren't you not curious, right, to at least entertain another reality that you may not have not been exposed to, right? So we are down to our last few minutes, and I'm just getting fired up. I have so many more questions for you all, but I want to give you an opportunity for final thoughts and sharing any contact information, anything that you are involved in that you want to put out there. I know, Joe, you have a training in June, because I got some staff members going, attending it. I went to the last one, so thank you for your work in that space. But Any final thoughts? Anything coming up? Contact information? Any final words of wisdoms?
Well, I could just say, first of all, I apologize for the lighting. This is not my normal Zoom Google Meet space. My wife kicked me out because it's Saturday. So, when the video camera came on, I had about 5 minutes, so I took the lampshade off. That's about the best I could do. But no, I do appreciate this opportunity. I am very much, just so you guys know, Damon Harris was a big part of Bond. I went to college with. He's a good friend of mine. And I admire what he does, and I admire what you guys do. I'm a very, like I said, I'm at a charter school. I'm self-taught in a lot of ways, so I'm not out in the world like some of you guys are. But I do appreciate you guys being out there and doing the things you do, and I look forward to spending more time with you Bond guys and getting to learn a little more about you guys in the coming days. So I do appreciate the opportunity. And I've actually learned some things today, and it's always important. So thank you for your time.
Thanks for being here, Peter.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate this opportunity to continue to learn and grow as not only an instructional leader, but just to grow in general. And I look forward to plenty more opportunities. The Bond Academy has been fantastic. I'm looking to hear about what Joe Trust, the June conference that you're going to hold, because I want to continue to grow. This is, again, my first year as principalship, and I want to make an impact not only at my school, but I want to continue to make an impact in my district. I want to keep this thing going because ultimately our students are going to benefit from it.
Thanks for Otis for being a part of the conversation and being in this space where we're learning together.
Definitely. Thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to say thanks. It's always beautiful to connect across all the distances. Just talking to myself also, but talking to all the especially the Black folks listening. We got to stop playing small. We know what time it is. We've been knowing what time it is, right? We know what needs to happen. We just really need to continue to say what's on our mind. And advocate for our children, and we could pick up the pieces later on, and they could pick up the pieces later on. But don't be scared of what you know. Be strategic, of course, but don't be scared. Be bold, because I don't know how long this window is going to be open when it's listen to Black people moment. I don't know. It wasn't like this 2 years ago, so we got to maximize this, right? And bum rush the door, in all kind of ways. So really just, take care of yourself in this work. Yes, I got to train in June. It's about a month away. It's a week long. I have Tina Love, Goldie Muhammad, Dr. Ibram X. Kendi there, and a whole bunch of amazing stuff. And, all kind of other stuff we can connect on. So I'm loving connecting with the Bond folks as well. So anyway, anything we could dream up to do, I'm with it. So much appreciation to y'all.
And Joe, I'm gonna have to you gotta connect with the equity unit too, because we got some stuff for you.
Let's do it.
We have a couple minutes left. So one of the things, as I work with leaders in our school system, is that it came up in our conversations, that idea of fear. And how do you get to that? How do we get past the fear, at the same time being strategic? Because I think you have to, you got to navigate your spaces. But what advice would you give to leaders in pushing past being afraid?
I got you. One, they're going to react and be resistant whether you ask for $1 or $100, right? Whether you say we need to change one class or 100 classes, there's going to be resistance, right? So that's one, right? When you learn that after a while, it's like, oh, okay, you're just going to be mad about everything. It's like, okay, well then I want all the keys. You know what I mean? I want the whole castle, right? So one of it's knowing that. The other one is you got to be linked up, right? You got to have your people too, right?
Yeah.
And you do have to have an exit, right? Because like when you got to exit, you're dangerous, right? Because when folks know they got you in a box, that's all you got. You got to be scared, right? You're like, oh no, like I can take my talents to South Beach, take my talents to LA, and then now it's a different situation. But that also means we got to be strong and valuable too, right? Because when we don't know our value, we can be convinced, much like the quote, right? When we don't know our worth, yeah, we can be scared. But like, oh no, but like once we step into our value, we're like, no, you need to be scared, right?
Right.
And you are, and that's a different thing, right? So it's not really about us being scared. So.
Thank you.
I think that this, last summer showed me sometimes you just got to jump into the deep end of the pool. You can't think about it. You just got to do it. And you just got to say, I'll have a few things in my head about, I'll strategize a little bit. We just got to do it.
Right.
And let's just see what happens. And I think sometimes, good things happen from that. Don't overthink it.
I love what he said, Joe. I love what you said about us knowing our value and being like, you know what, we're going to get resistance anyway. I'm going to put it out there. And then guess what? If I need to go and take my talents, like you mentioned, somewhere else, then you know what, I'll do that. And that county or district or wherever the case may be are going to benefit from what I bring to the table. And I think that mentality right there is the game changer, because I feel as if a lot of us don't want to do that in fear of us losing our job, so to speak. So right. I love that mentality of us understanding our true value in order to do the true work that we need to get done. No doubt.
So gentlemen, y'all have dropped us a bunch of knowledge. I feel smarter being in your presence. You've also taken us to church. And so as we close out this session, I got a little inspirational music for us. I'd like to thank all our participants for zooming in today. And let's keep pushing and know our value.
Turn it up, Troy.
You the only one jamming over there, Troy. We can't hear the music. What's going on?
Oh, it won't let me. I don't have the ability to share. So next time. You got my point. Thank you all, though. It was a great conversation.
Yeah, good to connect with y'all, too.
I appreciate that.
All right. Thanks, guys.